Hello everyone, I'm Nizzahon here for Card Kingdom, and today I'm bringing you another episode of Planeswalker Profile. This is a series where we look at the competitive history of all the different Planeswalker cards a particular character has appeared on, as well as talking about their design and more. This time around, we're going to be looking at a Planeswalker who has returned after a long absence, and that's Garruk. Counting the Throne of Eldraine version of Garruk, he has so far appeared on 6 cards. 5 of those 6 have seen at least some competitive play, and the only one that hasn't is the brand new one, which hasn't really been given a chance yet. Alright, let's get started with Garruk's very first Planeswalker card, which is Garruk Wildspeaker. Garruk was one of the first characters to get a Planeswalker card in the game, originally debuting way back in Lorwyn before Mythic Rarity was even a thing. He comes with a suite of powerful abilities. Any Planeswalker that can protect themselves with creature tokens tends to be pretty good, and Garruk does a great job of that, creating a fairly beefy 3/3 Beast token. Creating creature tokens does go on to be one of Garruk's major calling cards as a Planeswalker. He can also untap lands, which can help you ramp. Then he has an ultimate that is essentially Overrun, and will end the game if you have a board presence. That's another one of his abilities that's going to be mimicked by a lot of future Garruk Planeswalkers, which will have a variant of an Overrun effect. This first Garruk saw a lot of play while it was in Standard, basically amounting to a staple in any deck that had green in it, whether they were aggro or control decks. It was also played in extended Deathcloud decks, which basically sought to take advantage of the fact that Deathcloud was an older card that didn't have Planeswalkers involved in the effect, so you always got to keep them around. Garruk Wildspeaker could both help your Deathcloud go bigger and provide you a win condition after the dust settles. He also used to see a little bit of play in Modern. While Garruk Wildspeaker hasn't done a lot for us lately, there is only one other Garruk so far that has found more competitive success. The next time Garruk would appear would be in the Magic 2012 core set, where he appeared as Garruk Primal Hunter. This Garruk continues the theme of Garruk liking beast tokens, and this one can even up his loyalty while he makes them to protect him, which is pretty strong. He also has a powerful -3 ability. If you ever manage to use that and draw even 3 cards, 3 because, you have a beast in play, and you also manage to keep Garruk around, your opponent is not going to have a nice time. His ultimate is no joke either, as an army of 6/6 worm tokens is pretty scary. This Garruk didn't have quite as impressive of a performance as Garruk Wildspeaker, but he was still a very relevant card in the Standard of his time, showing up in a lot of green decks. This included Kessig Titan, Mono Green Aggro, and Jund. However, he hasn't had much of a career outside of Standard. Garruk next appeared on a double-faced card, making him the first Planeswalker to ever appear on one of those, and even today the only other one in the game is Arlen Cord. The flavor of this double-faced card is pretty awesome too, as on one side we have the Garruk we were introduced to by Garruk Wildspeaker and Garruk Primal Hunter. He is mono green, makes creature tokens to protect himself, and has a unique ability to essentially fight creatures and work as a nice removal spell. The front side is interesting because neither of his abilities cost loyalty counters on their own, but the fight effect does lower his loyalty if the opponent's creature has power. If his loyalty drops at all, he transforms into Garruk, the Veil Cursed. This side represents Garruk after he encountered Liliana Vess, who used the power of the Chain Veil to curse him, causing a transformation of sorts for him. Both his powers and his body were warped by this encounter. From here on out, Garruk appears mostly as a black-green Planeswalker to represent this curse. Anyhow, once Garruk transforms into his Veil-Cursed form, he can make some Death Touch creature tokens, so he's still protecting himself with tokens whether he's Veil-Cursed or not. But he can do some more traditional black things too, like tutor up creatures in exchange for sacrificing one, and while he has an Overrun type effect like Garruk Wildspeaker did, this one is based on cards in your graveyard. Garruk Relentless would go on to be the most successful of all the Garruk Planeswalkers so far. Like those who came before him, he was mostly only played in Standard. He was played in some fairly traditional green decks there, but he was also favored in Reanimator decks that sought to load up the graveyard, as his ultimate ability could really end the game on the spot in those decks. He even saw some play in Modern Rug Delver decks back in 2012. We next saw Garruk in Magic 2014, where he was a mono-green Planeswalker again, because the card features the pre-Veil-Cursed version of Garruk. This Garruk couldn't make tokens to protect himself, which makes it no huge surprise that this is the least successful version of Garruk we've seen so far. He still did some sweet stuff, but 6 mana was a lot for a Planeswalker that needed some help to stick around. His +1 could potentially draw you a bunch of cards, and his -3 could help you put a creature into play that could protect him, but having to have a creature in your hand so that it can be protected is kind of a problem. Finally, his ultimate would make it so you can get a lot of extra creatures in play, but the cost was too great for this Garruk to be as significant of a player as his predecessors. He did find some success in Devotion to Green and Gruul aggro decks in Standard, though. The next time we saw Garruk was in Magic 2015, where he was back to being a black-green Planeswalker as he had been in Innistrad. It was also the last time we saw Garruk before he re-emerged on Eldraine. This is the most expensive of all the Garruks printed so far, but he brings a lot to the table. He went back to making 3/3 Beast tokens. This time, though, they were also packing Death Touch. He's also got an interesting ultimate ability, which is kind of a more complicated overrun than had appeared on his earlier cards. He also came with the ability to blow up Planeswalkers or creatures, and this capability, plus the tokens, made him an interesting card for control decks in Standard. The Apex Predator version of Garruk saw play in Standard decks like Golgari Constellation, as well as Abzan and Sultai Control. It would be 5 long years before we saw Garruk again, but he has finally made his reappearance in Throne of Eldraine, where he appears as Garruk, Cursed Huntsman, which is an intentional nod to the huntsman that appears in a variety of Grimm's fairy tales, which is one of the main inspirations for Eldraine. Still plagued by Liliana's curse, he continues to have a black-green color identity. Unfortunately for Garruk, he would end up being messed with by another wily Planeswalker, this time Oko, who used his abilities to control Garruk and have him as his bodyguard. This version of Garruk, mind-controlled or not, is very powerful for both Eldraine Limited and Constructed. He also has a pretty interesting design, not having an ability that lets him tick up in loyalty automatically, which is kind of a callback to Garruk Relentless. He can do it sort of indirectly, though, by creating wolf tokens that when they die give him additional loyalty. So these wolves not only protect him, and do a great job of it because he always makes 2 of them, they make it harder to kill him as well because of his increase in loyalty. The ability that really sells me on this version of Garruk, though, is his -3. Destroying a creature and drawing a card right when he comes down means you are at worst going to be getting a 2-for-1, and if he is allowed to churn out wolf tokens too, he's just going to take over games. He also comes with a typical Garruk ultimate, pumping the whole board and giving it trample. I think Huntsman Garruk will be used in decks very similar to Garruk Apex Predator, controlling decks that can just treat him as both a win condition and a removal spell. I'm going to be very surprised if Garruk Cursed Huntsman doesn't continue the long tradition of Garruks being successful on Magic's highest competitive levels. I also think he is arguably the most powerful card for Throne of Eldraine Limited, so if you ever see him, you should be taking him. Well, that does it for this edition of Planeswalker Profile. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that it's easier for others to find it, and don't forget to subscribe here to the Card Kingdom YouTube channel so you can stay up to date on all of their videos, including future editions of Planeswalker Profile. Let us know in the comments if there are any Planeswalkers you really want to see in a future episode. Thanks for watching.